We're riding a night train to the end of the line, the Zimbabwean border.
Sorry.
These men fled the regime in Zimbabwe. Up until a few days ago, they were living illegally in neighbouring South Africa. But the South Africans don't want them. They're shipping them straight back.
Only the situation in Zimbabwe is forcing us to be in.
So people are starving and people are suffering now. See? They are starving. It's painful. Just look at
Hands. The guards yell for heads down. Hunched up like this, the guards told us, the men are less likely to jump. But that didn't stop over a dozen Zimbabweans from leaping off the train we were riding. They risked death rather than face the regime back home. Morning, and the border draws closer. People told us these were their last hours to speak freely.
You can't get the truth in Zimbabwe, no? No. Even if you get me in Zimbabwe, I can't tell you the truth. Because the time I tell you, there's some people of Zambia watching me. When you go, they kill me.
By nightfall, these men will have been marched back into Zimbabwe. But we're not allowed to go with them. The Zimbabwean government has banned all foreign journalists. This great natural beauty is what Zimbabwe was once famous for. It's home to the Victoria Falls, one of the 7 wonders of the world. For us, the falls were our way in. We've come to Zimbabwe pretending to be tourists, to see for ourselves an increasingly repressive and secret state. This was once one of the most popular vacation spots in Africa. But we find our hotel eerily empty. "10 years ago, Zimbabwe was one of the richest countries in Africa. But now runaway inflation tops 1,000%, and this money isn't worth the ink on the bills." We just changed our money. And thankfully they've issued a new note today, the $50,000 bill. When I said to the lady in the bank, this is rather a lot of money to be carrying around, she laughed and said it was nothing. It takes stacks of money, just for the basic necessities here. Once called Rhodesia, Zimbabwe was ruled by a white minority until 1980. But after a fierce war of independence, Robert Mugabe rose to power. A freedom fighter turned dictator, Mugabe has transformed Zimbabwe from the prize of Africa into a state of fear. We set off for Mugabe's seat of power, Harare. If we were caught reporting, we'd be arrested. We see a long line of cars at an empty gas station. People can wait here for weeks, we're told, for fuel that may never arrive. Down the road, we find another sign of the hardships we'd heard about. A garbage dump where people scavenge for food alongside baboons. These men told us they were surviving through luck alone. I asked who was to blame.
You know, everybody knows. We can shut our mouth, we can say anything, but we know who is responsible. You even know who is responsible.
He was too scared to mention the name of President Mugabe. So you would say that it's not easy to talk about these things in Zimbabwe?
It's not easy. Because there are handful of people who are enjoying the life, but the rest are not enjoying anything. So it's very hard.
Harare, the capital. We were advised to film only through our car's tinted windows. We immediately spotted more of what President Mugabe doesn't want the world to see. Long lines outside of a bank. Shortages of everything. This man was desperate to unload his Zimbabwean dollars.
How much have you got?
20 million.
More and more, survival depends on a growing underground economy. But you won't find any of this in the daily newspapers. They've now been taken over by the ruling party. This is journalist Dumisani Malaya. He shows us the site of Zimbabwe's last independent daily paper. Its clashes with the government made it vulnerable to attack.
So the daily news was within this building.
Can we stop here?
A bomb was dropped in this gallery there.
A bomb?
Yeah, a bomb was dropped. Apparently it was dropped by a car drove past this place at some breakneck speed. It dropped a bomb there. It hit the gallery.
Dumisani would only speak to us in the back seat of our car. He told me he'd been imprisoned twice for his reporting.
You know, the cells were packed. A cell designed for six people, you'll be pegged like sardines. In there, you'll be 35.
Journalists are routinely beaten and jailed. Dumisani is one of the few who will still tell the truth about Zimbabwe's epic collapse.
Zimbabwe is without a doubt the highest inflation in Africa, if not in the world. It has the weakest currency in Africa, if not in the world. You know, those kind of things. And really, that's why it becomes a big story. It is almost like it has now become a monumental museum of failure. The air is fraught with the frustration, with the anger, with the despair, and some people have just given up.
It wasn't supposed to be this way. Robert Mugabe was once a liberation hero, admired around the world. He ushered in prosperity, healthcare, and a literacy rate of 85%, the highest in Africa.
We are humanitarians. We don't want to see people killed.
But politics turned into thuggery, and holding on to power became Mugabe's top priority. In TV ads, the ruling ZANU-PF party openly threatened opponents.
This is one way to die. Don't commit suicide. Don't be foolish. Vote ZANU-PF and leave.
When the opposition nearly beat Mugabe in the 2000 elections, the president lashed back.
Lies! Lies and more lies!
Mugabe embarked on a radical land reform plan, violently seizing Zimbabwe's biggest farms, owned by whites, many of whom had funded the opposition. But instead of giving the farms to ordinary Zimbabweans, Mugabe handed them over to party loyalists and generals.
There's sort of hypocrisy. They've no feeling for any other person, for any human beings anymore. What they want is to make sure that how can they maintain their power base.
Margaret Dongo was a former ally of Mugabe and a famous freedom fighter. She was the first member of parliament to confront her colleagues in the ruling party.
I met them in banks, I met them in street, and I said, but guys, is this what we fought for? Honestly, why are you burying us alive? And they'll say, Margaret, you know, it's not our fault. It's about the big men. And the next question you ask, so why can't we have a change? Then they'll start stammering. You look at the country going down the drain, and you look at the time we took to build it up, and then one can just destroy it overnight. It's something painful.
Margaret Dongo's high profile makes it possible for her to speak out. But we know many of Mugabe's political opponents have been scared into silence. We drove south to the city of Bulawayo. Opposition to the ruling party runs deep here. President Mugabe stands accused of massacring some 20,000 people in this area early in his rule. Things looked worse in Bulawayo. Long lines around the block for food. We hid a camera in a backpack and went inside a supermarket to look around. The rest of the country was poor, but here the mainstay of the local diet, maize or cornmeal, was nowhere on the shelves. Outside of town, we find fields lying fallow. Zimbabwe used to be the breadbasket of Africa, but land looted by the government produces little food. Now we've heard there's a new policy. The government is forcing poor family farmers to make up the shortfall. This woman told us the army had taken over her farm at gunpoint. She protested and was punished by a soldier. President Mugabe claims this new policy of farm takeovers will provide for the people. But on the outskirts of town, we discover bags of cornmeal being loaded onto government trucks. Few here, it seems, will eat any of it. The UN estimates nearly half the country, over 5 million Zimbabweans, will be in urgent need of food by the summer. We were taken to see a shop owner who spoke to us at great personal risk. She says the ruling party is using food as a political weapon.
People are now saying we've been promised lies for quite a long time. We had all the hope and trusted these people were driving us the right way. Those are the ZANU-PF that are saying so. Now we have seen these people are playing foul out of us. ZANU-PF is just doing some havoc to the people.
Far removed from the suffering on the ground, President Mugabe recently celebrated his 82nd birthday.
Welcome to this special program, Reflections at 82.
He used state television to answer his critics.
Over 25 years of independence have brought Your Excellency more vilification and demonization from the West. Sure. Is there anything wrong with the man, Robert Mugabe?
I don't know. The judgment is that of others. The judgment is that of my people. My people say I am right in the things that I do, and that's what I listen to. Those who say I am wrong, I'm a dictator, if you look at them, I don't look nice to them, but I look nice and handsome to my people, isn't it?
But for most Zimbabweans, especially here in the south, President Mugabe's words ring hollow.
We are being muzzled by a government that has become hostile to its own people.
Archbishop Pius Ncube has become President Mugabe's most outspoken critic.
I've refused to be intimidated. I know many families that are spending 4 or 5 days without food. I parted with a lot of money, people coming here, women coming and crying before me. We haven't eaten for all these days. And I to look around, sometimes I've even a lot of debts. I go borrowing money to help these people.
The Archbishop's sermons are monitored by government agents, and he's received death threats. But he hasn't softened his attack on President Mugabe.
He's a heartless person. How many people are suffering for this man? Hasn't he had enough power after 26 years? He should be ashamed enough to say, I've stayed long enough, I should get out and let other younger people come in who can do a better job than me.
What the Archbishop would tell us before we left would get less prominent Zimbabweans jailed.
What I pray for is that people become so restless and angry, and to get the army to their side and police to their side, and to stand up against him and bring him down.
In our top story tonight, 14 murder suspects appear before a Bulawayo court.
This is what happened to some men inspired by Archbishop Ngube, who became active in the opposition.
In the gruesome killing.
In this extraordinary footage from Zimbabwean state television, the men are marched to an open grave, and local police force them to admit to the assassination of a ruling party member. A few days later, President Mugabe used the man's funeral to denounce the opposition before the nation.
Comrade Carlos' brutal murder was a bloody outcome of an orchestrated, much wider and carefully planned terrorist plot.
One of the accused opposition members, Kitani Sabanda, was arrested and imprisoned for 3 years without trial. We tracked him down in exile, and he told us his side of the story.
I was taken before cameras to make indications on a grave where there was a man buried there, a man that I never killed there. And I was made to proclaim before the nation that I was the murderer of that person.
Tortured into confessing, Kitani says his case was a classic example of what happens to those who oppose Robert Mugabe.
I was at one time raped by prisoners while prison officers washed off, and it was done by senior ranking prison officers. All this is acts of intimidation and human degrading and just tearing away the moral fiber within me.
Kitani fled to safety in South Africa, along with his fellow accused, Sazini Mpofu, seen here handcuffed to him on the right. But last year Sazini made a bold move. He returned to Zimbabwe. We promised Kitani that we would try to find his friend Sazini. And with leads from the opposition network, we finally tracked him down. He agreed to meet us at a safe location. We asked him why he risked his life to return home.
I came back because I felt I had to look after my young sisters and brothers, and I felt that if I was to stay out of the country, it would be like abandoning them.
Since Sazini was set up on this murder charge 5 years ago, the opposition has splintered. Now, Sazini says, the government remains largely unchallenged.
I think people, are no longer willing to fight because of what they've seen happening to other people and us. From Mugabe's point, or actually the whole ZANU-PF group's point, I think they are telling themselves that they have won.
While Sazini was in prison, his house was burnt down by thugs loyal to the government. He's begun cautiously rebuilding it.
I might finish the place and then they come and burn it down again. So I'm still trying to see whether it's safe for everyone to come back home, or if it's not, then we have to abandon the place.
As most of the country struggles to survive, leaders of Zimbabwe's ruling party live in splendor behind high walls. And behind the biggest wall of all lies President Mugabe's newest palace, rumored to be the largest private residence in Africa. 3 acres of floor space, 25 bedrooms, marble from Italy, and roof tiles from Shanghai. Just down the road, we see unrelenting poverty. According to the World Health Organization, Zimbabwean women have the lowest life expectancy in the world, 34 years. About a year ago, Mugabe launched a campaign that he claimed would beautify the poor urban areas. But many say his real aim was to wipe out a breeding ground for opposition. Mugabe called this campaign Operation Murambachina, or Operation Clear Out the Filth. Footage of it was smuggled out of the country.
When the police came, we were just he forced to push out.
They said you must take all your belongings within 30 minutes time.
Police burnt and bulldozed thousands of homes and market stalls in towns around the country. Up to 700,000 people were made homeless, and millions lost their livelihood overnight. A year later, traces of these people remain, but no sign of the new homes Mugabe promised he'd build them. And more than a third of Zimbabwe's population has fled the country. In the last few years, Zimbabwe's troubles have spilled into neighbouring South Africa. Here in the capital, Johannesburg, we witnessed the local police trying to control this desperate scene.
Move it!
These Zimbabweans escaped President Mugabe's rule, and they don't want to go back. They will wait here all night to apply for political asylum. An exiled Zimbabwean journalist took cover behind our car.
There's pandemonium here, pushing and shoving because people are looking for asylum papers. But there's no system or there's no mechanism in place. They are rubber bullets, but they're shooting. I mean, the sound is actually gunshots.
For these Zimbabweans, a place in line represents survival. They know only a handful will ever be allowed to stay. In the last 5 years, over 2 million Zimbabweans have fled their homes for South Africa. Here, they've become a shadow population, eking out an existence in some of the poorest parts of the cities. The exiles look to the South African government to denounce President Mugabe and help bring about the end of his regime. But newspaper publisher Trevor Ngube tells me this isn't likely.
And the South Africans don't know what to do with Robert Mugabe. The Americans don't have a clue how to deal with this man, apart from going in there and bombing him, which is not an option. They would want regime change yesterday, but how do you do it? How do you deal with a fallen hero like Robert Mugabe? A man that the whole of the continent has looked up to. A man that assisted the liberation of South Africa, for instance. How do you tell your father to shut up and sit down? Robert Mugabe, he's not getting out of power. He's made up his mind that he's going to drop dead in office.
As long as Mugabe stays, his people will continue to flee. At crowded deportation centres in South Africa, the unlucky ones are rounded up by the police and herded back to a country on its knees. In our time in Zimbabwe, we were lucky enough to have met those still willing to speak out. But their voices are growing harder to hear.
This is torture. This is torture.
This is my hometown, Harare, the capital of Zimbabwe.
You see the Pearl Assurance Company up there? I remember going right to the top as a kid and thinking, what an amazing experience, just the height and the sense of power. And on the left there, the Anglo-American building, the red building, great symbol of the stranglehold of international monopolies.
All these buildings are new since independence. This whole place really took up after independence, and only now is there this colossal reversal and stagnation.
This film you're watching now will be condemned outright by the current government of Zimbabwe, and as a result, I shall be compelled to go into exile.
This is the Reserve Bank here. Just introduced a $500 note, which is almost small change now.
Ironically, this will be my second enforced exile. The earlier one took place in colonial times. When I was a kid, my country was still called Rhodesia, a stronghold of the British Empire and paradise for a happy few, the settlers who wanted to cling on to it forever.
I'm not prepared to sacrifice everything I've worked for just because Britain wants us to have a black majority rule before time. But the black majority rule will come, and so it should. But I must be ready for it, I feel.
That was not my mother, but it could well have been.
Boys, come here, quickly. Come on, up. Did you see anything? No, sir. Did you see anything? No, boss. Did you? No, master.
This is me in the first film I ever made.
Sir, are you a Rhodesian? Yes, I'm a Rhodesian, born and bred. If there's anybody here in this country that should know these black people, it's me. I've been brought up in this country. I've worked with these guys my whole life. I know what they want. I know, for instance, that they respect the tough man. They like the man with a strong arm. That's what they like. They don't want too much of this freedom. Does them no good.
Well, it's me and it's not me. I'm acting a bigoted colonist. If you think it's a caricature, take a look at the real thing.
The point is, the average African doesn't know what a vote is. He can't eat it, he can't sleep with it, and he can't spend it, so he's not interested.
When the white man came to this country, they didn't know anything else but grass huts and grass fires. The majority of them couldn't make a wheel.
The direction my life has taken over the years is closely bound to one powerful political figure, arriving here today to open Parliament. Robert Gabriel Mugabe, hero of my youth as the man most responsible for sweeping away the colonial era, and head of Zimbabwe for well over 2 decades.
We will work hard to forge the unity, the peace that we have created, and work hard to further the positive programs that have sustained us in the past and improve on those on which there have been failures. We are, as yesterday we were, our own redeemers, our own liberators. Let's say that. Kwabere Zimbabwe, kwabere nokubatana, nokuwina my elections, down with British imperialism and neo-colonialism.
My film predicted that dialogue would never get anywhere with the colonists. It supported the African nationalists and Robert Mugabe, who had just been imprisoned by the Prime Minister of Rhodesia, Ian Smith.
We are in complete control in Rhodesia today. We, the Europeans, we are all powerful. We have the reins in our hands, and we can pretty well do what we like.
1.
In my film, the countdown was to war. This is why, not surprisingly, I was kicked out of the country.
The hell do you want?
As the guerrilla war against Smith gathered pace, Robert Mugabe escaped from the country, soon to spearhead the Zimbabwe Liberation Army. The struggle was for a democratic, multiracial society free of colonial oppression. It took 10 years of war to achieve this goal and give birth to independent Zimbabwe. And at last, we all came home.
We fought each other. That is history. Let this be a good start to our future together.
This is a great moment. It's a moment of our victory, the culmination of our national struggle, conferring upon all of us, the people of Zimbabwe, whether we are black or white, full sovereignty, full democratic rights. We will ensure that there is a place for everybody in this country.
Mugabe, do swear that I will well and truly serve Zimbabwe in the office of Minister of the Government. So help me God.
The celebrations featured the guerrilla army choir led by Comrade Chinks. Several years later, here's Comrade Chinks once again, now playing a leading role in my movie, Jit. My objective with this comedy was to put over the optimistic and vibrant spirit that carried us through 2 whole decades of independence.
Hey, UK! 2 double scotch, 2 double vodka, and a Coke for my princess. Now move it now, I haven't got all day.
Everything was on the move. The economy, education, health services. Mugabe became the most prestigious African leader, and Zimbabwe the model of a post-colonial nation. We were able to build new lives, settle in, and feel secure. Rage, riots, killings, starvation, doom. This is where we are today. The collapse has been sudden and fast, a matter of months. Imagine the shock. Your world falls apart. Nothing is as it used to be. The future, a tunnel of despair. Imagine the sense of betrayal. This is not at all what our fight for freedom had been about. And all this because of one single man. My image of Robert Gabriel Mugabe as hero had been torn to shreds. The countdown to chaos began in February 2000. Mugabe held a referendum. Behind a smokescreen of constitutional changes lay his real intention: greater personal control of government. Mugabe and his party, ZANU-PF, had been the driving force of the guerrilla war, both through military tactics and their political vision. Ever since independence, all attempts to build an opposition party had failed abysmally.
My opinion is that the people are going to vote yes, by and large, and that they will support, therefore, the draft constitution. But a constitution like this, sacred as it is not above the will of the people. And those who go into parliament go into it carrying with them the mandate given them by the people, and they have the right, therefore, to amend the constitution in the future without consultation.
But the people were becoming wary. The MDC, the Movement for Democratic Change, had sprung from nowhere just before the referendum. This party was the mouthpiece of the urban youth, who hadn't lived the liberation war and couldn't stomach the president's autocratic style. Their leader was Morgan Tsvangirai.
It is an unfinished national agenda. Tiri kudaidza pano kuti enough of corruption. Tiri kudaidza pano tichiti enough of brutality and abuse of Zimbabwe. Tiri kudaidza pano tichiti enough of poverty. Tiri kudaidza pano tichiti enough of ZANU-PF.
Mugabe lost the referendum. He was in shock. Never had Robert Gabriel Mugabe known defeat on any front. Up till then, the MDC had not been worthy of his attention.
Nyika yedu yeZimbabwe ndimo matakazvarirwa. Vana mai nababa ndimo mavanobva. Tinoda Zimbabwe neupfumi hwayo hwose.
Gabriel Chaiba of the MDC was once a supporter of Robert Mugabe. As a kid, he even ran errands for the guerrilla movement.
Tinoda rusununguko muZimbabwe. Simukawo nyika zuva rayo rasvika. Chitepo imare muZimbabwe, chitepo imare muZimbabwe, tinodawo nyika zuva rayo rasvika. You see, my voice now is
Gabriel singing a liberation song from my book Black Fire, which came out at the height of the war for independence. The book shamelessly sided with the guerrillas. It was inspired by Mugabe's socialist vision of the future Zimbabwe. Black Fire was launched by the American civil rights author James Baldwin.
At one point I thought personally that this song was going to be the national anthem. And if you remember, in 1980 we didn't have a national anthem when we raised down the Union Jack. We didn't have it. And what we have now is not a national anthem. You see, you can't have a national anthem that talks about war, that talks about whites, that, you know, that is essentially divisive. You can't have that. But let me tell you one thing that you must know. There is one single big problem in this country. And that problem is none other than Robert Mugabe, the president. He circumvents his ministers. He disregards opinion from anybody else except himself. And of course, what they are pursuing today is not what had been part and parcel of the broad political agenda of the liberation war effort. It was never about Mugabe being a perpetual leader. It was never about creating a one-party state.
With a general election due only 3 months after the referendum, the MDC went on a campaign through the commercial farming districts. Our chief source of foreign currency is tobacco, and most of it is grown by 4,000 white farmers.
Why waste our time going to the elections if that is the intention? He cannot continue to be president overseeing a parliament which the majority of the people come from the opposition. How do you rule?
Up till now, many of these farmers had been card-carrying members of Mugabe's party, ZANU-PF, and Mugabe's message had always been clear: you stay out of politics and we'll leave you alone.
So I tell you what I want to invest in. I want to invest in the MDC. This is what we've got to invest in now. And I'm going to say Chinja, Maitiro, Chinja, Jongwe, Chinja, one time,
When these very pictures appeared on local television of the farmers supporting the MDC, Mugabe saw them as an unforgivable betrayal of trust. But there was also a huge advantage to be gained from the event, and Mugabe jumped at it. Here for all to see were his political rivals hobnobbing with the descendants of colonists. This mixing with the farmers enabled him to accuse the MDC of undermining the peasants. Panicked by the shortness of time to the general election, the president knew he needed to take drastic action to rout the opposition. He made state broadcasting endlessly repeat those pictures of the white farmers in cahoots with the MDC, so that the two faces of the enemy could sink into the public mind. Then he looked to history to lend weight to his strategy and provide it with a name. His strongest card was the undeniable fact that the British stole the land in the first place when they came looking for gold in the 1890s. The colonists had barely arrived when the native inhabitants rose up against them in what is called the First Chimurenga, the First Liberation War. The repression that followed gave the British total control for the next 80 years in the territory they named Rhodesia. The Second Chimurenga, Second Liberation War, was the one spearheaded in the 70s by Mugabe, who acknowledged that he could never have won without the crucial assistance of the peasant population. So now the president decided to flood the media with these images of colonial repression and rally the people back to war for what he himself proclaimed the Third Chimurenga. The hour of the war veterans had come. For 20 years, these 50,000 ex-combatants of the guerrilla war had been in limbo. Now Mugabe put them back on center stage. Having had Mao Zedong as his ally, he knew just how useful it could be to have a Red Guard at your beck and call. Readopting his nom de guerre once used to terrify the colonists, Hitler Hunsvi, head of the war veterans, became the man of the moment.
The land issue must be corrected. And if the legal means has failed, then we as war veterans, the war has not been finished. We are advancing towards our land and we are taking it. We are not invading.
The farm invasions were triggered by a program called Fast Track Resettlement.
You are a Zimbabwe, I presume. Yes. So it's land for all Zimbabweans, not land for a few. Land must go to the peoples of Zimbabwe, where we want to take our land. Willing giver and willing taker. We change it from willing seller, willing buyer. It's willing giver, willing taker.
Our veterans akaenda zviri kunzi they are squatters on the white man's land. White man's land here in Africa. Where is the black man's land in Europe? It's a black man's land, and therefore the black man must have the right to determine who shall have it and who shall not.
It was quickly determined that those who should have land should be supporters of the ruling party. During the months ahead, chaos would gather pace as people from the cities came out and grabbed plots, and party chiefs took over whole farms, lock, stock and barrel.
We have not come here because we have abused each other. We have not come he has not abused each other. We are explaining to each other the method of settlement of land. We have been settled on these kinds of lands which we call commercial lands. That's right. You people were settled on what they call communal land. Understanding, I have no legal instrument to allow you people to take the land. I cannot give you. No, we are taking it. But I am not giving you permission. Let it up to you. Yeah, we are taking it. We are taking it. That is not. I cannot stop. Yeah. We are saying. Nico, we defeated Smith in the bush where he was so strong. We are going to defeat you.
We're born and bred Zimbabweans. We've got every right to be here. We've got just as much right here as anybody else. We're single farm owners. We're not multiple farm owners. What is the reason for all of this?
Mugabe parades his war vets in triumph. He had won the June 2000 election. The promise of land got him the peasant vote, but he only scraped a majority because the constitution allowed him to appoint 30 members of parliament of his own. It had been a close shave with the MDC. The president's ultimate target was the opposition. He was itching to teach them that he was not a man to be disrespected. The MDC's Gabriel Chaibva turned out to be one of the first to experience the lesson.
Hey, how are you?
You don't use your camera here. It's a sensitive area.
Yes. What kind of harassment was there in Bandura?
You see, a lot of our electioneering teams were arbitrarily arrested, detained, essentially to slow down our electioneering process. I've got names of police officers who were responsible for torture of some of our young men there.
Yes.
But I reported the matter to the officer commanding, to the duty inspectors, and no action was taken. I was personally present.
Yes.
It was a military type of an ambush. They actually allowed us to go into the thick of them, and then we started to be attacked.
Who were these people? Who attacked?
ZANU-PF youths. You saw it in the Daily News.
Hello. Hi. We've come to see Dave.
Our farm manager.
Dave, the man we're looking for, has two things against him. He supports the MDC, and he's a black man managing a big commercial farm. In Mugabe speak, that makes him a traitor.
Hello, do you know where we can find Dave? He's staying in the cottage, Dave Chigvala.
Dave had gone into hiding in a safe house.
Yes, Mr. So what happened? What happened? Did they come to your house? What happened?
A mob of about 150 war veterans dragged Dave away in the night, took him to the local ZANU-PF headquarters, where they struck him and whipped him with barbed wire, then left him for dead.
It was just blood all over. See, you can see this. I was hit with a machete.
A machete?
You can see on this one here.
And
this
4 ribs?
Yeah.
4 ribs broken?
Yeah.
Jesus.
This was on Thursday. They beat you up, they carried you to airport.
Yes.
And dumped you there.
Yeah, in the bush.
Is there anything you can do now, Gabriel?
You see, what I will have to do is to take this matter back to I will report back to the party and to the parliamentary caucus.
There's absolutely nothing he can
We are aware
do.
of the problems that have been going on in airport.
In practice, the opposition is powerless as long as Mugabe has complete control of the armed forces.
So what are you going to do now?
Well, as soon as I'm back on my feet, I'm going back to the farm. I'm just going to continue farming.
Another worker on the same farm was not so lucky. He refused to swear allegiance to ZANU-PF, so he was beaten to death. A few personal possessions remain untouched, like a shrine outside his house.
You made our land red with blood. Say what you like, you cannot change history with your words. The settlement of Rhodesia. Mr. Cecil John Rhodes wanted to spread the civilizing influence of Britain from Cape to Cairo.
Settlement of Rhodesia, Mr. Cecil John Rhodes, he must make, because he had big dreams, from Cape to Cairo.
Chenjerai Hove is an internationally renowned author.
Okay. Mr. Cecil John Rhodes wanted to
We held
spread
this
the
workshop
civilizing
together on a screenplay we wrote on the Chimurenga Wars, going back to the 1890s.
Now we're going to do another run through now with much more feeling, right? Are you happier now? That was just a read through, really.
The coming of the white men had made wise people look at bravery with different eyes. I'm not a coward.
You know, sometimes I think his head is full of water. That is very funny.
The screenplay shows the impact of Mugabe's so-called Third Chimurenga War on traditional rural society.
A chief's position in the village is a very personal matter. If you want to remove a chief, it's a very personal, because he is traditionally entitled to that post. So as soon as we elect our leaders, they begin to think that they are entitled. It becomes personal instead of being public.
Except in Zimbabwe, even before we elected them, they thought they were entitled. We won this country. Your right to write your article, Chenjera, would not have come about if I didn't spend my time in jail. So in our particular case, it's even more serious, because our president and our ruling clique believe that they are entitled, not because you elected them, but because of what they brought about.
There's no civil entitlement. Everybody thinks to be ruled is a privilege, not a right. You know?
No, everybody thinks that to be ruled is to be frightened. See, fathers are not elected.
Women's League.
The Women's League. All the women are the wives of the leader, the president. So they can dance, and then they can sing all the praises. The youth become the children of the president. And the soldiers become a personal militia to defend the leader, not the nation.
I think the thinking starts in the family. It starts with how you raise your kids. Why I think the family is important is because the African family has been traumatized.
Yeah, and I agree with you, the family is important.
If you have a traumatized family,
yes,
you're going to have a traumatized society.
Right.
Okay? So if you want to, I don't know if correct is the right word, then you go into the family and you ask the man, how do I treat my wife? How do I treat my kids? How do the kids treat their mother? How do the mother treat the kids? Right? And then you evolve your society from there.
The vast majority of people that you ask that question will say, look, you're crazy to even ask me that kind of question. I tell my wife what to do, I tell her what to cook, and so on and so forth, and you're telling me I'm abusing my wife.
So if I think that my wife is my property, and she can ask the question, if you make me managing director, I think that my deputy managing director is my property, and he can tell me what to do.
It was from here, at the headquarters of the party, that the president stepped up his campaign of terror to win the 2002 presidential election. Delighted by Hitler Humsvy's vigor in dealing with the land seizures, the president now asked his favorite puppet to broaden the definition of the enemy.
The British, you are not supposed to give directives to our president and government. Take care of your government and not take care of Zimbabwean government. This is our government and we are here to protect it and protect the gains of independence. You are always thinking that the war veterans are going to move. To move to where? Why can't you move your settlers out of Zimbabwe? Get them away.
Language is key to Mugabe's Machiavellian plan. Zimbabwean whites constitute barely 1% of the population, so why not make them more dangerous by labeling them settlers and stooges of Tony Blair?
I
the rhetoric of Hunjvi unleashed the dogs of war. It was like a time warp, going back suddenly to colonial days. The veterans had a specific target, a peace march riddled with whites and members of the opposition, a vast, dangerous enemy.
Can we take two of them? All of them? We'll have to take both of them. Shamar Moon, how far? Where's the other one? Who? He's here.
Just ask information.
Lift your head. There we go. There you go. Stay.
They hope that by creating lawlessness, beating up people, people will be fearful of going to vote for the opposition. That's the whole idea. But it is stupid. You go beat somebody up and you ask him to vote for you. It doesn't work. Now, this is the criminal element now that comes into it. There are those now who saw opportunities that, look, there is a system collapsing. And there is a system that doesn't work. And these people are desperate for a revival of their political fortunes. So they now go on the drawing table and say, look here, if we are going to revive the anti-white mentality, the anti-British mentality, the anti-farmers mentality, then we can revive the political fortunes. So essentially you are now seeing a scenario where the so-called war veterans, they are not war veterans, they are merely thugs and criminals.
Wilfred Mandler resigned in disgust from the War Vets Association.
No, it's not the war veterans who are doing this. It's ZANU-PF. Those are ZANU-PF supporters masquerading as war veterans.
Yeah.
They are only using the tag, the brand name war veteran. It's like you bottle your Pepsi Cola in a Coca-Cola bottle, and then you market it as Coca-Cola, but it's Pepsi Cola. They've been deliberately created just to cause the chaos. This is to create the impression that these are the people who are the leaders of the third Chimurenga.
Well, that's a power.
Yeah, that's good.
What Ian Smith's culture developed in Zimbabwe was that the one who has the power, the police, the army, and so forth, and is the one who must win.
Oh, wow.
Steve Chigorimbo is a committed ZANU-PF supporter.
Thank you.
When I played golf as a boy, these courses were reserved for whites, and Steve was a caddy.
But he's making it in his head into a war. It's not. Doesn't have to be a war. We can have a fair election.
It has to be a war.
It has to be an election, not a war.
It has to be a war because your constituency, at the moment, their understanding of who goes to the top of the power log must be the person who can demonstrate ability to use power.
Why
it is terrible.
Educate the people. Why not?
You haven't got the time.
Many years ago, there's a guy, Frantz Fanon. He wrote Wretched of the Earth.
Yeah.
He wrote all these texts in the 50s and 60s. And he is outraged that these people are not responsible for the power they have. And instead of beating up people, people should be educating.
Yeah, but if ZANU-PF today, Michael, if ZANU-PF today decides to go and educate people on the corrective of voting, they will be out of power.
Robert Mugabe Avenue. I can't remember what this used to be called.
Mugabe had started off after independence with a policy of racial reconciliation. When I directed a film on colonial prejudice based on Doris Lessing's novel The Grass is Singing, the president was most upset. He feared it would offend the whites.
You, get back to work. Get back.
Nana lomfazi yanhlanye.
Speak gibberish to me.
I want water. Inqaniwe.
Don't you dare speak to me like that!
Now, 20 years on, the president would say my film was perfectly fine. And suddenly, I'm the nigger in the woodpile, a settler, an enemy of the people through the color of my skin.
All right. Get back to work. All of you.
They are the greatest racists in this world. Onai kwese, kwalai kwese, even in the United States. No black man at this stage can become a president of the United States. Impossible. And these are the countries, you know, which point a finger at us. There are racist incidents, racial incidents day in, day out in Great Britain, in London. People being discriminated against. We don't do that here.
Mugabe's skill lies in putting his finger on the truth, then twisting it to his own advantage. This is how the logic of his land seizures and his resistance to globalization have earned him considerable prestige in the Third World.
They say that Bin Laden, who bombed America, they said they were terrorists because the definition of terrorists means when you attack innocent people. But when America goes to bomb, they also do the same. They finance the terrorists, Renamo in Mozambique, UNITA in Angola. They finance all sorts of people who are fighting against legitimate governments, which may not be in good books with America. So in terms of the practice, America is the greatest terrorist nation in the world.
I've known Chen Chimutengwende since the 70s, when we were exiles in London campaigning for African nationalism. As the ZANU-PF Member of Parliament for Chiweshi District, Chen is honourable guest for a prize giving at his old school. Until recently, Chen was number 2 in the government, where he remains a powerful figure. His views faithfully reflect those of the president.
The gap between the industrialized countries and less developed countries is increasing, and still new methods and schemes are being devised to keep the developing countries even further down.
Yes.
Through WTO and other international institutions like IMF and World Bank. The forms of struggle have to change, and they can be schemes like that of South-South cooperation, countries of the Southern Hemisphere uniting with themselves, among themselves, and with forces in Western countries, like people who are demonstrating against globalization and WTO, get together in terms of networking and expose our enemies and advance on them. We must be left alone to develop Africa as a united continent, free from exploitation by European Union governments and the North American governments. And now the whites are getting very courageous because they think they are being backed by the international community. And by the way, the word international community does not include Africans or Asians or Latin Americans. The international community means Western Europe and North America.
For several years, Queensdale Club was a popular venue for the writer Chenjerai Hove and other artists for literary and musical evenings. Party headquarters was notified that these events were dangerous to the security of the state. War veterans threatened to burn the club to the ground. An escalation of threats has driven Chenjerai into exile. As freedom of speech dies in Zimbabwe, Chenjerai's poems and these haunting songs of Chiwaniso will be heard no more at Queensdale Club.
Which involves shifting the composition of debt from short-term to long-term. Our position on the land issue is now well understood by the majority of members of the international community, who now accept it as just and reasonable.
As the 2002 presidential election approached, the chief, the father of the nation, slipped into the shoes of Big Brother, determined to keep power by all possible means.
Measures will be taken to ensure that the history of Zimbabwe is rewritten and accurately told. This session will consider the...
For Mugabe, a 40-year career was at stake. To increase terror, he set up a form of national service which requires absolute obedience to the party. They look so innocent, these youths, but they're responsible for hounding, torturing and killing members of the opposition and their supporters. Our senses become dulled by horrific imagery from all over the world. So take just one person killed by the Youth Brigade, attach him to a long list of names, and imagine reality. The election took place. Mugabe was sure he was going to win because he knew how he was going to win. In effect, he's written a manual which is required reading for budding dictators keen to maintain a constitutional veneer. Here's how it works. Allow your opponents to campaign because this maintains the free and fair front. But reduce the number of polling stations in areas where you're likely to lose. For example, by halving the facilities in the urban areas, many people queued all day and never got to vote. Also, don't forget to instruct polling staff to take as long as possible to register each voter. It's essential to have some international observers. Just make sure they come from countries with which you have pre-arranged agreements to validate your election. Get your hands on the ballot boxes whenever possible. Mugabe had 1 million ballot papers up his sleeve belonging to the dead and missing. And finally, let everyone know you're the boss. aspect of repression under colonial rule and under ZANU-PF today are frighteningly similar, and so is our resentment. Now, as I go into exile from my country for the second time, Nelson Mandela's words from Rhodesia Countdown keep ringing in my ears.
Time has proved that none of the great powers or international organizations are prepared to force justice through in Southern Africa today. And we are placed in a position in which we have either to accept a permanent state of inferiority or to defy the government. We choose to defy the government.
Today, as the world looks elsewhere, the government eradicates all opposition. Millions starve as chaotic land distribution triggers economic ruin. Once again, we choose to defy the government.
This country belongs to 12 million people, not 50,000 war veterans. This is our country. If Mugabe time to go comes, he will definitely go. We'll make him go. If he wants a war, we'll leave our offices and go to war.
Yes. If the KX combatants are being sent to come and collect the cannons, let us go to war. War is war.